Hi, I'm Natalie, owner of the Sewing Studio, and today I'm going to show you how to attach your borders properly and get them looking really nice. So most people that sew on their borders actually take and sew down one side and chop it off even with the next edge. And when we do that, if our quilt is not already square, then we've made it even more unsquare. So I'm going to show you how to measure and get those borders attached correctly so that we can end up with a really nice square quilt or project in the end. Let's take a look at what we need. So what we'll need to get started today is a project that you're working on. I have a small project so that you can see it really well on how to measure. This does work for any size quilt or project that we're adding borders to. And sometimes even when I'm adding sashing between blocks, then I'll use this method as well. So today we're going to add a border on the outside of this little mini quilt, and I have the strips that I need to fit all of the outside. And then you'll need some straight pins to be able to pin everything together, a measuring tape so that we can measure the sides and get the correct measurement on the length of our border strips, and then I have my ruler and my rotary cutter. So to get started, what we're going to do is take and add one of these strips to the outside of this project. And what a lot of people do will take and just sew this down and then cut it on each end so it fits. But if our project is not square, this side might be shorter than the middle or the other side, and that's causing this to lean in one direction. So the correct way to put a border strip on a project is to actually measure both sides. So we're going to measure this length, we're going to measure through the center, and then we're going to measure on the outside and take the average of those three numbers. So for this one, I have 14.5 on one side in the center. On mine, I have 14.5, and then on the far side, I have a little over 14.5. It's almost 14 3/4. So it looks almost square, but you can see that it's a little long on that side. So we'll take those three measurements and actually find the average of the three. So to take the average, we're actually going to take 14.5 plus the 14.5 plus the 14 3/4, and then divide that by the three measurements. That's actually how we take the average of those measurements so that we get the correct length. And that's going to be approximately 14 5/8. So we're going to take and measure out two strips that are 14 5/8 and cut both of them down to size. On this first strip, we want to make sure and remove the salvage, so I'm going to do that first and then measure out my 14 5/8. Okay, so now that we have the border strips for the top and bottom of our project, what's important here is that we find the center of our project on this side, and then we also find the center of our strip, and we're going to match those two centers. Then what we'll do is also find the center of each half. So that would be a quarter, but what we'll do is from each half, we'll just find the center here, and then we're going to match that at that point. Because what we are trying to do is pull our project more into a square project, and the way that we do that is to pin these in place, and then if one side or the other is longer, we're just going to kind of ooch and scooch it so that it lines up and it pulls it out. You'd be amazed that your feed dogs can actually pull about 1 inch extra of fabric even across your project. So here we're just going to take and bend our project in half, and I just match the outsides, and then here where the center is, I'm going to take and put a pin in it. So there's my center. And then at each one of those sides, we're also going to take and match the outside to that center point. And then put a pin in that side. Okay, and then we're going to do the other side as well. And I just kind of pinch and mark it. You could certainly take it to the iron and iron a crease in it. We just need to keep up with where that point is. Okay, so there I have the center marked, and then each side, the center of each side marked. So you should have 3 pins. We're going to do that to this strip as well. And then find the center of each of those sides. All right, so now we have both of those marked on our project and on our strip. So then we're just going to take right sides together and we're going to match those pins. So wherever the pins match, that's where we're going to take and pin that together at each of those spots. And then pin the outsides even as well. Okay, so that's going to be good enough on this small project, but if we're doing a larger quilt, you would want to make sure and run several pins between these if those gaps are very large. And on this far one, you can see that's where that's a little bit looser. And so when we run that through the sewing machine, that extra width will be taken up and evened out so that that side looks a little bit more even. So we're going to take that over to the sewing machine and sew that down, and then we'll come back and do the same process for the other sides. So today I'm using our Baby Lock Altair, and it actually has a quilting section that will allow me to use my J-foot as my 1/4 inch. So on our screen, we're going to go to quilting, and then we're going to pick the stitch number 2. That moves my needle over. Look at the machine front. There. That moves my needle over so that I can run my project along the right side of this J-foot, and the needle is at a point where that's a 1/4 inch seam. So we're just going to run our normal 1/4 inch seam on this project. When I add borders to a project, I do usually backstitch on each piece. When this is quilted eventually, what often happens is these borders try to pull loose. And so if you will backstitch on your border pieces, it'll help hold it stronger so that it doesn't come unsewn while we're trying to quilt. Okay, so there we have the first piece of our border on our project, and you can see how nicely it lays with the outside of the project, and it's completely aligned, and it didn't even pleat anywhere on our pieces. So we're going to do the exact same thing to the other side. So here I've already marked the center, and then each side, the center of each side. And then on this strip, I added the pins in the same way. And I pinned on the outside of this one so that I could show you here that I'm taking each place where my pins are and I'm actually lining them up together. And then I'm taking the pin out and then running my pin through both pieces of fabric so that they're pinned together at that point. Okay, we're going to come out here and pin the outside again. We'll find here in the middle, I'm lining up those 2 pins, making sure they're together. Pull out that one that was on the project and then running this one that's in the border through both pieces of fabric. And then we're going to do the same thing out here on this side. Okay, so then we'll go back and we will sew that strip down. So there we've added the 2 pieces to our sides, and now we just need to go back in and add this other side. Since we added fabric to the 2 sides of our project, we've actually made this piece even longer. So just make sure that you don't end up cutting 4 of these to this size because that's not going to fit after we've added the border pieces. So after you add the 2 side pieces, then we have to come back in here and measure again. And we're going to measure each side and then through the middle so that we get the 3 measurements we need. So ours on this one is 16 1/4. And then in the center, we now have 16 1/4. And then on our far side, we have 16 5/8 or 5/16. So we're just going to go with 16 1/2. When it's that close on us, there's no sense in doing all of the math and making it that exact. We'll be able to pull that in. So for ours on this piece, we're going to just do the 16 1/4. Oftentimes when we add the first border and we do it correctly, it's going to start showing that we've already got it more square than we had before. So let's go in and cut those pieces down, and then we'll add that to this project and have this one wrapped up. So when you're measuring out your strips, I'm using my mat because 16 1/4 fits on this board. If you're using a project that is much larger, most of our quilts are much larger than this one, remember that you can fold your pieces in half and cut half the distance for your strips. And so here I'm just making sure that I'm square on the end and that I'm square on one of the edges. The other thing I've seen people try to do is they put their strips at the very, very bottom. Well, it's really hard to read your measurements on the bottom of your mat. So I always come up to the 1 inch mark and use it so that I can really see down here my measurements, and it leaves my strips much straighter. So I'm just square here on the end, and then I'm just making sure that I'm lined up with that 1 inch mark all the way down. And then I'm measuring here at 16 1/4 for us. And I'm making sure that I didn't really move my strip and that I'm square on the 2 16 1/4 marks above and below the piece that I'm cutting. That way, this one was double folded so that I got the 2 16 1/4 strips that I need to fit on each side. So I'm going to go through the same process and get those on, and then we'll have all the borders ready for this project. So there we have our borders all added to our project, and it looks really nice and so much more square. I know that it's a little extra effort to go through the process of getting our borders on in that manner, but your quilter will absolutely love you, and it just gives it that little bit extra of a professional look in the end. Thanks so much for joining us. If you liked what you saw today, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. And if you want to receive those notifications, make sure you click on the bell icon. Thanks for letting us turn your inspiration into a creation.